Recently I was watching an old video of Outside Extras where the presenter Luke was talking about a passion he developed for racing sims and racing games, as it's not normally a genre he plays. And with me not having touched a racing game in a long time as I'm more of an RPG enjoyer myself, I found myself wanting to dip into a racing game, but the question was, which one? I spent a fair bit of time researching current racing games, ranging from sims which seemed like more work to enjoy and required more of a setup than I have room for personally, and arcade races like the Forza series, or mixes of both like Gran Turismo 7, or even dipping my toes into some of the older titles that I've played over the years. But I wanted something new, something that I hadn't touched before. And to overcomplicate it a bit, I wanted a bit of story in the game. So I settled on a series that I thought I'd long left behind in the bygone era of the PS2 days. Need for Speed. These are the last racing games that I played that I actually really enjoyed, and Underground 2 and Carbon were the ones that I've got the most memories with personally, so I figured why not? I never played Most Wanted, but when researching for this video it seems like it's very lovingly remembered by the community. So looking into what titles are available now, the two most recent entries are Unbound, which visually looks amazing, but the cel-shaded style mixed with a realistic presentation wasn't really vibing with what I had in mind. So I took a look at the preceding game, Need for Speed Heat, and saw it had a story to it as well that was in the vein of the older Fast and the Furious films, and figured, you know what? I'm down. So now with game in hand, I wanted to ask the question, is Need for Speed still a good series these days? And more importantly, how good is Need for Speed Heat in 2025 as an entry-level racing game for someone who hasn't played one in 20 years? So in terms of the setup, Palm City is hosting an annual racing event called the Speed Hunters Showdown, where formal races take place all over the city, with prize money on the line. But there's another side to Palm City's racing scene, a seedy underbelly where deals are made and lives are on the line. Illegal street racing, where people race for rep on traffic-packed roads at night and trying to risk it all to outrun the police when they've had enough. To combat this underground racing scene, the local police have set up a task force which is led by Lieutenant Frank Mercer.
Speed Task Force.
Street racing has no place on public roads. Mark my words, if you are out there and you're engaging in this type of activity, we will find you. And if you think that you can get away by just hitting the gas, then you're in for a surprise. Because we are coming after you hard, and we are coming after you fast. Trust me, there is no escape.
The main frontrunners and drivers for the story are Anna, who's obsessed with proving herself to quote-unquote the League.
They're in the league.
Who's they?
The league.
Which is never really expanded upon other than some super exclusive racers at the top, and her brother Lucas.
Name's Lucas.
A retired racer who, after a very vaguely hinted at accident, now runs the garage that you'll utilise throughout the game. But he apparently owns all of them, and he still has some decent connections all over town for both day and nighttime racing events. And finally there's this guy, or girl, who kind of just wanders in off the street and is just there now, and spends most of the time just standing there taking awkward selfies with a car. They don't have a name, but let's go with Bob. Without wanting to spoil the actual plot beyond the setup, the main story, which I actually really find myself enjoying in a pretty corny way, is decent, and it's got some good moments throughout with the stakes steadily going up in some regards, because there's some grinding required to get an almost arbitrary level up in order to push the story forwards, which was a bit jarring when the story did hook me in particular sections. But as a tip for people, try and work on getting your car's power level as high as possible as quick as you can. It's totally possible to beat the main story with a performance level of 300. I kept doing enough to do the next portion of the story, then hitting this, you must be this many things to proceed, and having to go off and do more races to upgrade my cars. Which I mentioned specifically as the pacing of the story, again, is good, and I found myself really wanting to see the next bit and where the story was going. But then I get stuck having to do a few hours of grinding while Anna and Lucas had complained at me over the phone that they were waiting for me to pull my finger out so that I could actually go and do the next part of the plot. Bit jarring, bit of a disconnection. This is something I did find a bit frustrating at times because I love good stories in media, but I think if the parts that push you to see the next part of the story be like right now, because there's some big twist that's just happened in the story, it could have been handled in a better way where Anna and Lucas could say, well that was crazy, but we need to get ready to make our next move. Right now we need you to go out and do some more racing while we finalise some things. That would have felt more natural and less like I was being barred from the next portion of a narrative to then immediately be hassled for not being able to do it right now. There's also some sub-stories available, but these honestly don't compare to the main narrative's plot as they didn't really have one themselves, short of a, hey, come race, there might be a goodie in it for you. And Bobby Boy was more than happy to oblige.
I can hear you in there.
They mostly served as a way to unlock more racing types in the city, like off-road races or drifting races, and when you complete those stories as well, you unlock a unique car or certain parts, which honestly is a nice reward if you're wanting that and want to go the extra mile, or if you're a bit of a completionist. Some of these cars that you unlock are marked as legendary cars from the older Underground games. I managed to unlock Underground 2's 350Z and Most Wanted BMW M3, but I didn't really use them as much, as in my head I had my own choice of car that I was using for the story. Now onto the gameplay itself. To start with, there's a great amount of cars to choose from as your reputation, but you can only select a few cars to start with, and they aren't likely to see you through to the end of the main story since you'll unlock a lot of cars as you level up, and doubtless you'll find something that more suits you. Build it to your liking and stick with it, like I did. You can upgrade your car's performance by buying parts from money you earn in the daytime races, but eventually you'll need to unlock more parts or cars via other means. The means in this case are the nighttime races, and this is where a lot of the risk-reward gameplay comes in that's blurbed on the box. You earn a reputation reward for each nighttime race, which you build up over multiple races and then cash that in when you want to return to your garage and level up from that. Leveling up your rep unlocks more cars and more parts, and the game tells you what level you'll hit if you cash in at that point of the night. You can also see what parts unlock at what level in the garage, so there's less guesswork involved on constantly restarting the nights. There's also more garages you can fast travel to around the city that are unlocked from the outset. I think if certain garages opened up at certain rep levels or by completing certain challenges or exploring, it would have incentivized exploring a bit more for me. Palm City itself though is open world and has a few different types of collectibles scattered about the map. But in terms of races, there's street racing, which can either be done on circuit based or sprint based events, drift events or off-road events, and once they're unlocked you can keep repeating them. None of the actual races are required to progress the story though. Short of increasing your rep and money, you can play any racing game you want realistically. If you want to do drifting solidly, you can do drifting. If you want to do off-roading, you can do off-roading, etc, etc. I chose to do this story as street racing, but the game's story missions are very heavily tailored to racing on roads and with a bit of light drifting in there, but not too heavily. So anything heavily spec'd into drifting is really going to struggle. I mostly stuck to street racing myself, just because that's what the story demanded. All of the racing events once unlocked can be repeated as many times as you like as well, but repeating races means less reward each time you do them. This is both present in the day and the night races, so this encourages you, if you're paying attention, to find other races on your map. It also does keep it quite varied, so you don't feel like you're just repeating the same tracks again and again, which is very appreciated for a game that's sole focus on gameplay wise, it's just racing. The driving in the game itself though is a bit weird. The handling's something that I couldn't tell if it's normal for the series now or even the genre, but again, I'm not really a racing game player ordinarily, but the driving felt very floaty and hard to control, especially drifting. I had to Google on YouTube how to even do it properly, as there's a couple of required drifting events in the story, and I was just not getting it at all. Once I got a feel for it though, it kind of clicked and I did have a lot more fun, but the drifting here is really odd, and if you don't have a car that's really tailored for drifting events like my main cars were initially, they were more spec for road-based racing, like very, very heavily. It did prompt me to invest in multiple cars, one specifically for drifting, one specifically for street racing, but having one tailored to each specific racing type helped me enjoy the game a lot more, and I would encourage it, admittedly. Just one final point on the drifting though. In some street racing events, some of the corners are quite tight, and your turning in some of the cars isn't great. I was spec'd out with street racing tyres for the most part, so I did get quite a lot of cornering that wasn't tailored towards mixing in drifting. It was a big hurdle to balance through, albeit initially, but again, once the drifting clicked, it was fine. Another thing I really loved in the older Need for Speed games was the car customization aspect, and I love that this is still a thing in pretty much all racing games now. All cars have a few options per body part type, but it didn't seem like an absolute ton of body modifications were available. There isn't much emphasis on visual modifications like the older games had though, strangely, which I found very jarring. One feature that I'm surprised wasn't available in a newer title like this was the ability to actually customize the colour of your underglow. You've got set colours that you can buy and unlock through completing challenges and a few default ones, but considering it's just an RGB colour on a shader, it did strike me as a bit odd that you only had hard set colours here. But you can get very creative here with the car mods, which is amazing, especially with the decal system. It adds a level of visual enjoyment when you're racing with your favourite car, rather than just having flat colours or even just stock colours. And the community surrounding the game have made some amazing wraps for every car, and honestly some of you guys are incredibly talented with your designs. I'm actually really jealous. Some of my showings are basic, but I kind of like what I did with my 350Z especially. I'd recommend taking a look at the wraps that people have uploaded because I can't stress enough how good all of these look. Again, some of you guys are incredibly talented. There is one one thing here though that did pull the decals down slightly, and it's that the texture pixelation in places when you scale a decal down. As much as I love these here, they really do look a bit jarring and bad when scaled down. It's a really minor gripe to have here for a game released in 2019 on the PS4, but I kind of expected better. Something that I've not touched on yet though is that your car actually has a health bar. It mostly comes into focus during the nighttime races as traffic, terrain, and the police can chip away at it during and after races. If you get low enough, you can drive through gas stations that are placed about the map to fully repair any damage, and you get 3 of these a night, which is great. But I only had to use them a few times during heavy police chases or when I really beefed it during a race, but I did feel like I had to use them, and I had to be savvy about it. The night races themselves though, they're fucking great, quite frankly. They really bring that underground nostalgia that I was wanting. They look flashy, the routes are interesting, and the street racing at night is more sprint based than circuit based. There's a few circuit based races, so for the most part you end up in a different part of the map at the end of the race to where you start, because the daytime events operate on you finish where you start via loading screens. There's none of that at night. You start the race, you're back in free roam when you're finished, straight away, no interruptions, no loading screens. Mid race though, you can have the police start chasing you after you do one night race, or even just mid-event, even on your first race. And depending on how keen you are and how you're feeling, you can try and drag out that chase for as long as possible to build up a heat meter. Building this upward to a max of 5 levels, which can grant you a multiplier for the amount of reputation that you've earned that night. But the police in this game are so brutal. Even at low levels of heat, they're absolutely relentless. They've got no qualms about just ramming you off the road, using tyre spikes, using electronic jammers just to shut you down. They're honestly evil. The police chases are definitely going to test your patience here. The police are aggressive to the point that it's just not fun at times. Your car often feels like paper in the early game, and they're tanks and they're just throwing themselves at you. And the chases really rely on you knowing the map well and making sharp turns quickly to try and lose them, or really incentivizing making jumps. But at night time, if you don't know the map that well, you're not going to line yourself up that easily without taking waves of damage, and you just won't really outrun the police, even at particularly high levels of heat, so just don't even try. You can destroy their cars by ramming into them though, but you'll quickly get whittled down health wise, and while it does add some challenge to the game, when it's this aggressive and non-stop, it's just frustrating, especially in the early game. Can't stress that enough when you're trying to get your rep level up. The only reasonable way to lose the police though is to make jumps, but those require a bit of setup and that you know the map well enough to know where the jump is. Also how best to approach it, and during a high speed chase at night, if you're in a bit of the map that you're not really familiar with, you're going to struggle to lose the police and probably end up getting busted. What I ended up doing a lot of the time was just doing a couple of races a night, getting naturally to heat level 2 or 3, then bouncing back to a garage before a chase could even start. The highest I got to naturally and escaped from was maybe level 3 or 4, but if you get caught, you lose a large amount of the money that you've got in your bank from the daytime races and nearly all of the rep that you earned that night, requiring you to start again, which is annoying, but it's not the worst mechanic in the world, I must admit. It does happen a lot though in the early game, and if you're not careful, you're going to end up getting as frustrated as I was. But as I bought new cars and new parts, I did see improvement. I even got better with the map, better at outrunning the police, albeit not much, but I've been so scarred by the difficulty of the chases in the early game that I just hated engaging with it at all now. And there's a few missions through the game that require you to be in chases or bash cars off the road, and those missions were good, but by god my avoidance of that mechanic made it feel like a slog at times, and you have to be really careful on those missions as well, as repair points are just not that generous along the mission route. There is quite a lot to unlock though. Parts unlock in tiers at certain rep levels, and they can add up to massive performance gains, so when you unlock a new tier, your first incentive is going to be to go back and upgrade your car as best as you can, but you'll likely need cash for that, and night races don't really give you any money, so you'll have to go do some daytime grinding and build up some cash that way. There are some cash exploits still present in the game though. I chose not to engage with them as it kind of disincentivized engaging with the normal gameplay systems. I did find after playing the game for a bit though that you have to read the descriptions of the parts that you're buying for your car to find out what specifically they offer. Certain types are only good on certain road surfaces, some turbos are only good at low speeds, and others are the opposite at high speeds. Another aspect of upgrading I didn't really pick up on, particularly until later on, was how important swapping out your engine is. It's quite expensive, and I didn't see the point of it initially. I knew they were there, but my current parts in my starter engine had higher performance than what the new one was. But what I didn't realise was that it was more about the potential horsepower to the new engine rather than the actual value of my current one, and swapping the parts out to stock, then swapping out the engines and putting my already purchased parts into the new engine, resulted in a better gain in performance. This was honestly a bit convoluted, and I feel like it could have been communicated a lot better. Either that or I just didn't read the prompts when they came up properly. I also didn't really notice this at first, because it did help me keep playing with my favourite cars in the higher level races and towards the end of the game. By the end of the story, I ended up with 4 cars that I use regularly. A BMW M3, which I'm pretty sure is the same model as the Most Wanted Classic one. This was my main car for quite a while. Then when I got stuck with learning how to use the drifting, I ended up buying a 360Z and spec'd that out specifically for drifting. Then really enjoyed the drifting races after upgrading it. Would recommend. This car handled like arse when driving normally around the map though, as it would spin out regularly when taking corners, but out of all of the cars that I customized, I really loved the decals on this one. It's probably my favorite. I also had an Impreza for the off-road races. To be honest, I didn't really put a lot of time into those races. I unlocked them quite late in the game. I mostly wanted to play all the race types to see how they all played, and I enjoyed the off-roading somewhat when I unlocked them, but by that point I was nearly done with the game. The decals for this one I did take off the community decals, and honestly this looks sick, so whoever made this, good job. But my main car that took me through the second half of the game was this Nissan Skyline. Once I upgraded this to replace my BMW, I absolutely loved it. I styled it to keep a lot of the look of the base model and then made my own decal for it. I can't say it compares to some of the community ones, but I liked it. Graphically though, the Frostbite engine looks amazing here. The draw distance is decent, but there is a fair amount of pop-in places there shouldn't be, even after a load's done for a race. It could be a bit distracting in the few instances it popped up, but I have to mention it because of the fact that it did, and reasonably speaking, a 2019 game shouldn't be suffering with popping this bad. The city and the cars in motion though are where the game really shines. The time of day that takes place in the daytime is late afternoon, and it looks really good when you're racing around the city, and your car looks great drifting around corners with this orange sheen peeking over the skyline and the terrain. The sun hitting the buildings and water really gives it a nice relaxing feel, and it really draws you in. Now the nighttime is where things really popped for me. The race checkpoint visuals are very stylized and counterbalance the darker parts of the visuals because of the nighttime effect. But the city's drenched in a lot of low-level lighting, buildings lit up by cars even on country roads. It all looks great. It's not so dark that you can't see, but it's dark enough that you have to put your knowledge of the map to the test when you're being chased by the police, because inevitably you will be chased and you will need to make some sharp turns. So paying attention to your map, to what's coming up, even the traffic, it's all very important. Another part of the visuals that I loved was the loading screens. Your car's put into some really sharp angle changes in a very well lit setup, and I really loved seeing the optimal look of my cars. This looked amazing, honestly. You can even have a look at your cars in the garage in the same setup, but not your current one, which is weird. It would have been great if you could actually go into that setup and take a look at it without having to select another car then go back to it. Just a bit of a weird one.
What, that's it?
The music, however, is where I might annoy some fans of the game. The music here just really wasn't hitting with me. When I think Need for Speed, I was thinking rap and rock music, but some of the songs here just didn't really vibe for me. Not that they were bad, but they just weren't to my taste specifically. Music adds a lot to a gameplay experience for me, and some of the music that I heard before I turned it off was just a bit too chill for me. I ended up playing a lot of my own music while playing the game, and that got me more hyped when I was racing than just driving around the map. Take this example section from a race. The music really makes a difference to how pumped up it makes you feel. Here's a song from the game. And now with a track that sounds similar to the older games. It really does make a difference to your experience. This is very subjective though, I realise, but it's something that I wanted to highlight as I was hoping for something similar to the older games in terms of the music style that I was used to. Listening to the soundtrack though when writing for this video, there's some really good song options, but I just didn't hear them when I was playing, so I ended up listening to my own playlists or even the older games playlists in the background. Having the ability to actually select what songs did and didn't play during gameplay would have been great, but I don't think that's really an option here because I couldn't see one. For the cars though, they sound great and the impact noises feel really crunchy and satisfying, especially when you take a car out or inevitably crash like I did. Overall though, I really enjoyed my time with this game. The driving's a little hit and miss and the police chases bordered on infuriating, but the choices that are on offer here for as far as cars, parts and tuning are concerned are pretty decent. In terms of customization though, it kind of varies. It borders on being shallow as a puddle in terms of the visuals and upgrades, but quite deep when you look at the performance tuning side. There's even some live tuning settings that I didn't really use at all, but they're there if you want to use them. Story-wise, really enjoyed it. It wasn't without its own issues though. Like rather than it being Bob,
I can hear you in there.
who just wandered in off the street and had zero stakes in the story and could have left at any time.
Yeah, I just want to get out there and race.
At the very start of the game, the guy that you play in the opening section, this Joe, why weren't we them? They had a reason to be involved in the plot. Like if the police stole or impounded their car and then Anna swooped in and rescued them and that was the first time that they'd met and then whisked you away to the next section with getting a new car, you'd have a reason to actually go and do the night racing. You'd have a reason to be involved in the story, since the story starts during a nighttime race. The story could have kept Joe in the shadows until we were rescued by Anna, and then you could have still had the customization aspect. So, spoiler for the last mission of the game, but this would have made the final mission where you chase down the most wanted M3 much better. Instead of it being the M3, it was your car, i.e. the box art car, and then you could have had that car be the one that you unlock at the end of the game as your legendary reward for completing the main story. Plus the mysterious league that Anna talks a lot about, they're in the story a bunch over radio and in a couple of missions, but they don't ever really amount to anything other than a vague concept and something that Anna is apparently just aiming towards. In previous games, I remember having to climb the ranks and beat certain named NPCs to progress the story, or have like a certain customization value or a certain reputation level. That should have been more done here by having your character prove themselves to recruit the League themselves in taking down Mercer and his goons, with the game ending in the same way as you being in the top of the league, and the post-game focusing on beating the now ousted corrupt cops and to get racers their stolen cars back. But in all honesty, it just screams missed opportunity. But it's easy to comment on what a game should be like, but in terms of what's on offer here, it was worth my time, and I can see myself spending a few more hours doing the post-game stuff, buying new cars, increasing my rep level. I really enjoyed it. The driving's something that if you're approaching it as a non-game racing player, you'll need to get used to it. But it's fine, it's only a small hurdle. If you're thinking of buying Heat though, I would recommend the game, albeit with the caveat that you should absolutely look up a how to drift tutorial first, because this is the biggest drawback gameplay wise, or at least it was for me. That and how aggressive the police are. But I think that's more of a skill level thing that might have struck me personally. So, what do you think? With all that in mind, do you think Need for Speed Heat's worth playing in 2025? With game prices raising to $80 plus now, it might be a good time to jump in and enjoy some older experiences on the cheap. If you enjoyed this video, please feel free to leave a comment, like and subscribe. It really does help me out. Have a good day. This has been Jay's Game Time. Have a good one.